Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask a question, and he wanted to know if, since he personally seems to have much better form on all his big compound movements if he does pause work or pause variations of the exercise, should he consider doing pause work almost exclusively for his big compounds for a while. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, do a little bit of crafting, and let's talk about this, because I think this is a great question, and actually I think it's a great idea. Matter of fact, cliff notes here, I had previously in the past, for people who want to get more explosive in their power, or for people who are competing in powerlifting, to train almost exclusively with pause work on their compounds and pause variations, and I've also called it dead stop training as well, for at least phases in their training. That I think it's actually beneficial for anyone who's trying to build power and speed. Particularly speed strength. I think it's an amazing technique to use for periods of time. And speed strength could be for MMA people, any sort of contact sport, any sort of field sport that requires speed or power, and including powerlifting and things. I think it's great. Now, the other thing to consider there, let's go a little deeper into it. From a hypertrophy perspective, could someone actually really benefit from doing pause work? And let me give you guys some examples of what I mean by pause work or dead stop training. Basically doing heavy exercises that allow you to stop the weight and come to a dead stop for at least a 1 count or a second to where the weight can't move. Example, pause squat, where you go all the way to the bottom, pause for a 1 count, ass to grass, and then squat it. Deadlift is always pause work because you stop and reset the weight on every rep, otherwise it's not a deadlift. If you're touching and going and bouncing, you're not deadlifting. You let the weight come to the floor for a 1 count, then pull it again. Pendlay rows, because the weight starts on the floor on every rep. How about pause bench, where you touch it to your chest and hold it for a 1 count, and that can be incline, decline, flat, whatever. Overhead presses, behind the neck presses, you come to the bottom, pause for a 1 count, press it. There's a lot of exercises you could come up with that could be pause work. Hell, you can technically do it with 1-arm dumbbell rows. You could do it with floor presses with 1 arm with a dumbbell. There's a lot of things you could do with even dumbbells that are compounds that you could do. You can be really creative with this. You don't have to just do barbell stuff. You can actually come up with all sorts of 1-arm variations of exercises you could do even with dumbbells to do this. Is it beneficial? Even for hypertrophy, yes. And here's what I'm going to get into. We know that the stretch reflex is very, very useful for hypertrophy. It's a good tool. But is it necessary? No. In fact, doing pause work that even removes the stretch reflex, if it forces you to reinforce form and it forces you to use the most important muscle in the exercise as the primary mover to get the weight started, actually becomes extremely useful for hypertrophy, because what you're having to do, and I'll give you guys a perfect example. Let's say on the bench press, some guys might struggle to activate their pectorals on the bench press due to their form, right? You see a lot of guys who are like, my chest just doesn't get big from the bench press. When you think about it biomechanically, everybody should be able to build a big bench from bench pressing. If you think about the way the exercise works, the pec should always be the primary mover. So if you're getting strong on the bench press, your chest should be growing faster than any other muscle in your body, right? It doesn't for everybody. It doesn't, even though it should. It doesn't for every person, and it's oftentimes because they're struggling to get enough chest recruitment early in the exercise, because it's oftentimes their technique, too much touch and go, too much bouncing, not enough tightness. But if you bring the bar down and touch your lower chest and you hold it there for a 1 second, and then you press, and you do that on every rep, on every set with the bench press, what you're going to find, because when you do the pause and you stop on the bench press like that, you're forcing the scapula to come back to hold it tight at the bottom. And when you start moving the weight, because you had to pause at the bottom, if you look at the biomechanics of it, what goes on the body, the pectorals are the only muscle that can actually get the weight started. And because if you don't get the weight started fairly quickly, you're not going to be able to press a moderately heavy weight. It's going to stick on your chest. So you're having to train the chest to turn upper threshold muscle fibers, those faster twitch fibers, the ones that you're really trying to hammer the most if you're trying to get bigger. You're forcing them to recruit faster. Well, if they recruit faster, you recruit more of them. The faster you can train them to recruit, the more of them you can recruit on every rep. So what ends up happening over time, if your chest has been lagging from, say, the bench press, and you start doing that pause work like that, and again, you're pulling your scapula together, you're having to pause to get tight to hold it at the bottom for 1 second, you're actually training your chest to recruit muscle fibers more efficiently. You're hitting upper threshold fibers at a higher rate than normal, and you're training it to do that. So what will happen eventually, it will turn your bench press, if you've been struggling to build a big chest off of it, it will turn it into a chest dominant exercise for you because you're training the motor pattern to do so. So that's a perfect example of how the pause work can actually improve hypertrophy if you do it correctly. You can take someone who is not developing a big chest off the bench press and retrain them to use their chest effectively on the bench press. And then once you start using your chest effectively on the bench press, just like with any other exercise, and you get stronger on it, what happens? That muscle blows up, it grows. So think about that in terms of the different exercises involved. All the different exercises, if you apply that same philosophy, the rest pause work can actually help you to build those muscles. You'll see lots of people who say things like, well, I know that muscle is supposed to be the primary mover on that exercise, but I don't seem to recruit it there. I do tons of that exercise and that muscle's lagging. Start doing pause work. Start doing rest pause training or dead stop training, to where you start every rep from a dead stop 1 count pause. Do that for a few months, and you're going to find that you're going to start recruiting the biggest muscles involved in those exercises that are supposed to be the primary movers. You're going to start recruiting them more effectively. They're going to start growing. So this is a useful tool even for guys who are just trying to make gains, not just guys who are trying to get stronger and faster, but for guys who are trying to make gains. This is a valuable tool. Again, particularly when you're the guy who's like, man, rows just don't seem to work my lats well. The bench press just doesn't seem to work my chest. The front press with a barbell just doesn't seem to work my delts that effectively. It seems to work just my triceps. Those sort of things. You're going to start finding that if you do the pause work, those primary movers are going to start coming up. And what you're going to find, what all strength athletes find, dead stop training and pause training makes you more explosive. And it makes you more explosive for the exact reason I described with the chest earlier. If you train the body to take the bigger muscles involved in an exercise and turn on motor units faster on them, because you have to get the weight started. Because if you don't start moving a heavy weight like the pause bench or the pause squat, if you don't start by accelerating it really quickly, you struggle to complete the rep. And so you might start with the first few reps. Okay, let's say even you're doing 8 rep sets explosively or 10 rep sets, not just doubles or triples. You're going to find that you're going to falter out, that if you can't get the weight started when you're doing the pause work and you start getting further into the set, you're going to fail sooner and you're going to not be able to lift the weight. So over time, it's going to force you to get more explosive to continue to do these exercises with the pauses, because you're turning motor units on more quickly. Well, what is power? Power is speed. Speed is how fast you can generate force. That's what makes you faster. That's what gives you sprinting power. That's what gives you punching power. And I understand people are going to say, well, no, there's a full body movement involved with the punching power. Yeah, but if you can turn more units on faster in your full body, you're still going to have more power. Meaning, even though we could argue that, even the glutes and the hips are used in a proper punch, they are. The full body's used. Glutes and hips that can turn upper threshold muscle fibers on faster, a couple microseconds quicker, is going to generate more power and more speed. So, this is how you get speed strength. This is how you get power. Pause work is an invaluable tool for that. So, in addition to the guys who are trying to put on muscle mass, anybody who's like, I need to be faster, I need to be able to sprint faster, I need to be able to jump higher, I need to be able to kick faster, punch faster, I need to be able to hit a guy on the football field harder. Pause work is an amazing, absolutely amazing and invaluable tool for that. So for a lot of different goals, I'm a big fan of pause training, pause work. I'm just a big fan of it. That's one reason I love the deadlift so much, and I think the deadlift is such an amazing overall power builder, because you have to start every rep. If you're doing it correctly, you have to start every rep from a dead stop in a heavy weight that recruits at least 60 to 70% of the muscles throughout the whole body. Again, it makes you more explosive, makes you more powerful, and that same philosophy can be applied to a lot of exercises. And if you start regularly doing your pressing with a pause, Pendlay rows with a pause, deadlifts with a pause, squats with a pause, you're going to eventually be forced to become faster and more explosive just to progress at them. It's the body's natural response. That's your training response to it. You're simply going to become more explosive in order to progress. Your body has to. And explosiveness is the name of the game in almost every sport on earth. If there are exceptions, but I would say 90% of sports, being more explosive and more powerful and faster is a huge attribute. It's a huge benefit. And, so it has its purposes for athletes as well. But again, going back to the other thing, it can also help you bring up weak links in your body. Things, again, like the chest, if you're just not a chest dominant bencher, doing that pause pressing like the way I'm describing can actually force you to become one, so that exercises like the bench press will give you a bigger chest, which is usually the reason guys are doing it. While these exercises, you're doing them so that they'll develop your whole body more, but particularly obviously the primary movers involved, you're trying to get the most development out of. And the pause work can reteach your body to make what is sometimes not always the primary mover in an exercise you're trying to make it the primary mover, and it can force it to do so. So again, it has a lot of different uses, and I think for certain people, doing pause work almost exclusively for entire phases can actually help you get through some certain plateaus in your training, whether it's a size plateau, a weak point training plateau, or needing more speed and power in a competitive endeavor. I think pause training and dead stop training is absolutely amazing use for entire phases sometimes. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.